Hello everyone, I'm Professor Margaret Rogers Van Coots and welcome to Journey into an Unknown World. I've been making many shows over the years, but today I'd like to do something a little different. I'm going to talk about the future. Now, obviously, I have to listen to my spirit guides, so I want you to know that all my shows have been a channeled work. In other words, my spirit guides are in my head, and though I'm talking to you and you can see me, I'm actually allowing you to listen to spirit guides. Now, spirit guides can be archangels, ascended masters, famous ones you know like Siddhartha Buddha, Jesus, Melchizedek, Muhammad, to somebody who's just a lower entity who is a spiritual being, who is a guide to you in your everyday life. And so understanding that, I just want to do a little bit of PR here and say that in the coming weeks we're going to do classes, talks, lectures, workshops on the paranormal, the psychic ability, and what it means to you and to our future generations. When I was born, it was very unusual to find a psychic child, let alone one that could give messages that were accurate at the grand age of 2 and 3 and 4 years old to the adults, proving survival of life after death. And I want to point out here that following wars, no matter how far we go back in history in the Piscean, that's the great Piscean age of 3,500 years, what we see is a constant belief through oracles, religions of the day, philosophy, theology, speculation, all this kind of thing was going on as to mankind's existence, why they were here, what we were doing at that time, and what our purpose was in some way. The Piscean age was very much an age of conquer, own, control, manipulate, and in some way insinuate that if anyone didn't follow what was considered to be the norm, then they were abnormal. So in terms of, say, the times of the Romans or the Greeks, we would have consulted the oracle, who was usually a woman or a man of high self-esteem and worth, who was able to look outside the box, as it were, in those days, and give individuals some kind of message from some kind of spirit god, whatever their religion and philosophy was. They would give them talismans for luck and for protection and things like that, made of stone. And so even back then in those days, they recognized that there was something beyond our normal everyday life. Of course, through those years, we went into religion, formed cults, did some bad things and some good things through those, went into the paranormal and witchcraft and all these kinds of things. But along underneath all that, slowly going on, was a building of awareness that we as individuals had a blessing within, and that blessing was the nature of spirit. Now, of course, at that time, people didn't understand much about spirit or spiritual awareness, out-of-body things. That's not to say they didn't happen, but it was that it was unexplained and considered phenomenon that should be put on the park bench, as it were, as a personal experience, and something that would in some way mean a symbolic message. So, for example, if someone saw a tsunami coming at their land, they either believed it was going to happen immediately, or they understood it as there was great change upon the earth to occur. And that was about the deep aspects of how far they could go, because they didn't have much understanding beyond the ways of today and the things that we do today. So now we can come forward a bit in time to my lifetime, where today Katie, Kamara and I were doing a show on the transitions and changes of consciousness in our age relative to the paranormal psychic ability. But let's not use that word psychic ability. Let's call it intuition or instinct. What we need to realize is mankind has always had intuition and always had instinct. It simply has changed with the ways of the days and the times relative to where people were, what they were doing. Now, it is said that once upon a time there was only one language upon the earth. Well, I can't prove that or disprove that, but I will say that knowing how we have changed the English language, just in my lifetime, we can begin to understand how every other language has changed the way of speaking. And so if we were to turn the clock back, say 400 years, and listen to any of the languages that we recognize today, i.e. Dickens and i.e. Shakespeare, we would see there's a great deal of difference in the way people put words together. Today, we tend to find the young ones are taking a bad word, i.e. bad, and use it as a good. So I was quite astounded years ago when my children came up to me and said, "Oh, that's really bad." And I'm like, "What? It's the most best thing that's ever happened." And of course they had to explain to me that it meant in the way of the old times it would have been considered bad, but now it's good. So we still use the word bad, but with a different connotation. We also know that as we phrase our words, we tend to corrupt our sentences and shorten them. In fact, today we know that there are many capital initials describing illnesses, for example, PD for Parkinson's disease or penile dysfunction. And so when we realize that we're capitalizing and shortening words, we also must realize we are losing. I have dogs in. Hey! Sorry, everyone. I have house sitting some dogs of my friend, and they're having a mood. Okay, so let's carry on. By the way, animals have moods just the same as we do. Not everybody is able to understand our moods. We say, "Oh, I'm depressed. Oh, I'm miserable. Oh, I'm upset. Oh, these things are going wrong," while other people are saying, "This is wonderful. This is fantastic," and yet we're both looking at the same thing. The difference is the way we describe to ourselves and to others the experience we're having. So our point of view on the world and our outlook on life has changed radically. For example, if we go back to the 1800s and the first gas lamps, I'm sure they were thinking that was the magic of the century, since they didn't have to cancel, buy any more candles and walk around in drafts and so on, but rather were able to get some heat out of the gas, though candles did heat the homes in the prior days. And now today we have gas, to electricity, and I'm happy to say the future will not use electricity in the way that we know it now. So part of what I want to do here today is to talk about how the changes are going to come upon us. And in some ways we will be afraid of it, and in other ways we'll be embracing it. So let's begin with what we know. We know that our universe is enormous. Scientists can measure it. I'm not going into all that here. But what I will say is we do know that there's a gaseous activity going on up there and all around us, below and above us and left and right, and whichever way you're looking at the world. There is a tremendous amount of birthing of new solar systems. There is a tremendous amount of growth in black holes that scientists are studying. And there's a tremendous amount of new birthing of stars that come from the mass gases that are constantly exploding. Now, if we bring that analogy down into our Earth, what we're actually looking at is the same thing on a mini scale inside our Earth. We have a large lump of iron, so they tell us, and iron in itself can be magnetized, and so here we need to understand that we're in a polarity going around our sun, basically because of that iron. If we didn't have that, we'd probably be floating off somewhere in another solar system, not knowing where we are, and all be dead. So we must be grateful that the Earth has this heavy weight of metal in the center of it that allows us to stay on our orbit around the sun. Now, here I want to emphasize I'm no scientist, but I did have a marvelous grandpa who was very known for his research into the old, the strange and unusual. In fact, he worked with the man named Mr. Carter, who was exploring all the pyramids and graves, and did that with my grandpa too. My grandpa was also able to douse oil and water, and in fact found many wells all over the earth, including the oil ones in the Pacific. At that time, everybody said we didn't need it, we would never need it, and what was the point of drilling in the ocean, we can't afford it, etc. He got a lot of negative responses. But he didn't end it there. He said of the Atlantic Ocean, okay, well, if we go under Cornwall, we can draw out the oil from the wells there. We'll drill down and we'll find it, because there's a channel. How did he know? By dowsing. He also was very interested in the appearance of space and of spaceships. In fact, when I was very young, he took me to see an area where a ship had landed. And I have to admit that he opened my eyes to many things. He was a very interesting man, very focused on everything that he wanted to do. And in many ways, as an ancestor to me, I inherited the genes, the DNA of his need to explore and discover. While my father, his son, was equally interested in the strange and unusual, it didn't really come into his world until his daughter, me, became famous, and then he became my student and got very interested in the things his father had said and in the work that I was doing. So here was a step forward from Grandpa to me, missing out my father for a while, and then a step back into my father's world to open him up to understanding something else. Now I want to use that little story there in a parallel here to what we're going through with the ending of the Piscean Age and the dawning of the Aquarian Age. We've still got older people like me who are Piscean children, and we have a lot of ideas and thoughts about whatever we used to do. And I will say that we often contemplated amongst ourselves our costs of houses and how much they'd gone up. And so let me say, for example, when I was 21, I owned my own house, and it cost me £3,900. Then when I got older, I bought a house here in Lake Havasu, and that cost me $89,000, probably the equivalent at the time of £45,000, $2 to the pound. Now today, people have been moving into my town and buying houses that are just like mine for over $700,000. What's caused that? Well, supply and demand, technology, and the way people are shifting and moving, afraid of issues that could arise in different places around the world. So what do we need in order to transform? Well, we could say we could have the Earth totally shift on its axis. The North Pole could become the South Pole and vice versa. Well, you can imagine what havoc that would do. It would give us the flood, just like Noah's story in the Bible. I've asked my spirit guides if that was likely to happen, and they said, of course, yes, one day, but not now. So sit down and rest away from that fear. However, been coming back to this lump of iron in the heart of our planet, we know there's molten lava all around it, and that molten lava is liquid. It's flowing, ebbing and flowing constantly according to the magnetic poles of not just the Earth and things on it, but of the universe within which we dwell. And having mentioned these gaseous explosions in our universe, we now know that there is a great deal of magnetic polarity out there, and so we are pulling on that. That is pulling on us. There is like a tug of war, if you like, going on between the universe and us, and of course the other planets. So what is that going to do to us? Well, according to my spirit guides, yes, we're going to have more strange weather. Yes, we are going to have floods. Yes, we are going to have a lot of earthquakes. Yes, we are going to see a lot more ice melting. Yes, we are going to see a shift in the poles. Yes, it will make a difference to who we are in the way we perceive ourselves on this planet. Now, bearing in mind that every living creature on this planet relies upon the natural resources that Earth provides for us. So let's go down to the basics, the Earth itself. Well, the Earth needs the weather in order to feed our crops, water the plants in, shall we say, the tropical areas where we have constant rain all the time. We need hardcore energy such as the ice to keep us on an even keel. But if the iron and the magma moves, then the ice poles will move. Now, the Earth is spinning, and here I'm going to give you a little story that happened to me when I was playing tennis in school. The ball had run away, had gone out of the court, and I chased after it. Tennis balls have these circles of rubber running around them, the way they join up and make the ball. And as it was rolling away, I noticed that those lines were turning away and disappearing, and the lines underneath and behind it were coming up on top. And as I went to pick up the ball, I heard Spirit Guide say to me, the Earth will flip just like this. It will slowly spin and turn off its axis, and it will roll over. Well, after that, I was kind of like, well, I'll ask my science teacher if that's possible. And I put my hand up in the class and I told her what I'd seen. And she looked at me and she said, that's an interesting theory, but it's not going to happen. Well, of course, that was the way they thought back in those days, 1952, I'm 10 years old, and there was absolutely no understanding of how small blob we were in the universe that we sit in, nor was there any understanding about how many other universes there could be out there. It was very much a spiritual time of praying to God to save us all from wars and from destruction, and believing in the power of prayer. Now, that might sound a bit old-fashioned, but it's not really changed. Today, we've moved into an understanding of the paranormal, and in doing so, we've awakened to the idea that there is, in fact, a community of ascended masters, spirit guides, who are overseeing us. Some call them the Watchers, some call them archangels. It doesn't matter what you call them, but the point is, yes, there is and are and always have been greater beings than us who have in different ways come to this earth to live here and do whatever they were doing of their time. So when people talk about the Great Sphinx, for example, I was talking to my grandpa, who actually was in Egypt during World War I, and of course he was born in 1800 and something, and when he was standing under there with under the chin of the Sphinx, he had a revelation that this head was joined to a large body, and that underneath that was something else, and he was dowsing it because that's what he was used to doing, and was very much drawn to go back there, and his men who were under him were interested in his theories and the things that he believed in. And by pacing out and dowsing and walking around, he said, this is a large animal under here. Now bear in mind, in those days there was still the face of some kind of pharaoh. People didn't understand what he meant was a large animal. And so they thought maybe a dinosaur or something, and it was kind of left in the air like that. But when he talked to me and told me about it, and I was about 14, he said to me then that this Sphinx was a building, as far as he could tell, and that inside there was some records of something. That's all he said. He didn't seem to know what the records were, and after all, I realized years later that he was actually psychic, because that's what he was doing. But in those days, one didn't think about psychic or use that word even. And so he was saying he was sensitive to the magnetic polarities of the earth and could pick up the impulses of what was beneath the earth, and by doing that could translate that geometrically in his mind to a form, a shape. And when I asked him, well, what do you think the shape is down there? He said that his findings had made it become a very, very large building, and was pacing it out and making several markings in his books and things like that. And I asked him, well, how old do you think it is? And he didn't come back with Egyptian and 4,000 years old and things like that. He said, it's beyond counting how old. We would not recognize those times. I cannot judge with my pendulum or with my dowsing just how old it is, but I will say it's the oldest thing on this planet. Well, that left me wondering. And I do have a photo of him standing under the chin with his men, and perhaps I can find it one day and put it up on Facebook. However, he left me with lots of thoughts in my mind, and obviously as a child I asked lots of questions, of which he said, you'll know these answers to these things one day. And I just said, well, who's going to teach me? And he said, you'll know, it's instinctive, you'll know, you'll understand. Well, of course, I realized that I was intuitive, psychic, like he. So I was using that word intuitive at that time. And there were a lot of things. He took me to see a landing area of a spaceship and pointed out the fins, a 3-finned spaceship, just like the ones we send up ourselves today. There wasn't any corn patterns in the cornfields in England or anything like that in those days. So it was very natural for him to just surmise the best that he could from that point of view of those times. And here we are now in the modern Aquarian age, the Great Aquarian Age. And by the way, the Great Ages go anti-clockwise, while horoscopes are read in a clockwise rotation. So 12 houses going clockwise do make up one great age. So you can see that as we are influenced in our horoscopes by the planets in certain houses when we're born, and also how they affect us in our daily life, we can begin to understand that the itty-bitty events that we look at and worry about and hope and dream and play about, doing our work or whatever, making excuses and so on, is actually a very small spit in the ocean of our universe and of the life of the Earth planet itself. So when people talk about the ancient times, like Romans and Egyptians, I was really not listening. I mean, I loved that. I went to Egypt and taught there. But what I was really interested in was a far greater history than that. So I decided to ask my spirit guides just who was living here in the ancient times. And particularly when I saw the great big blocks in Egypt that were impossible for us to lift today, and the same in Mexico, where I was teaching there, and other countries in the world where they exist, like Peru, I was immediately asking my spirit guides, how did they do this? How was it done? And I was given the reply straight away that in those days, science was related to sound. And of course, I didn't understand much then. I've grown and matured a great deal since then. Sound is a vibration, it's a resonation. And the parallels that I can make today are, if you think of a violin and all the many strings that are in a bow, and the friction that the bow causes to the strings of the violin, cello, etc., those kinds of instruments, creates a resonation in a sound box, which is the actual instrument, which results in a musical note. So once I understood that, I started to ask my spirit guides, well, how did they move the stones? And at that point they said it was very easy to create a magnetic polarity sound vibration suction code that would be coming out from this oscillation, would attach to a large boulder and whatever brick, whatever you want to call it, and they being also very big people, just like the dinosaurs are very big, were able to put these suction cups, the way I understood it at the time, onto either side of the stone, and it would take 4 to carry it, because it wasn't heavy. It had a force field of energy around it that made it float. Okay, magic, shall we say. Well, I accepted it. I couldn't say it was right or wrong, but as time went by, I understood a great deal more about the aliens too, because as I've said in my life story book, My Journey into the Oneness, I was visited by the small alien greys, and later the middle grade, too many words, the middle size, they're about 3'4", and then later the 4'6" ones. And so I learned there were different species looking the same. They had integrated their species over time. They had developed their species. Each one had different skills and talents according to where they lived and what they did on and off planet. By that I mean they are able to survive in space for a very long time, travel through it at great fast speeds, riding on the vibration of sound. Now, if they can do it, you can see that in time we will be able to do it too. And when you can travel at great speed through universes, you are able to hop, skip and jump, as it were, and keep an eye on what's going on. Now, here I want to clarify that we as human beings by nature have shrunk over eons of time. We do have the genetic DNA deep within us, and we do have the Greys' DNA within us. We do have the Arcadians, who are Arcturians as well. We have a lot of DNA mixtures in our body, most of which are silent, sitting there waiting to be awakened. And with the recent knowledge of being able to identify the chromosomes that we have, we only have 2 that define our male-female species, but we have many others that define our personality, our character, and our status in life, the way, how tall we grow or how fat we grow and so on. So all these genes are working for us to follow the codes that we have within our body to produce a human being as we know us today. But we must understand that just because we have a good brain and we are the superior being on this planet, that it doesn't mean we know everything. In fact, spirit guides often tell me what you know is about 1% of what was known on this planet so long ago. And when you think about the statues at the Easter Island, and you think about the great statues in Egypt, at Luxor, and other places like that, why did they make them so big? Well, hey, they were big, they can make them big. Just the same as today, we might decide to make a statue and build it to our life size. So it's not unusual for that period in time to make something the same as your life size, and to make it lasting. So, because like us today, we build buildings hoping they'll last forever, because we want to have these buildings around us because they make us feel comfortable. And look what we did, and hey, isn't this amazing? Well, if you look at much of our buildings throughout the last century, we can see a great change in the way we build buildings today. For example, I was in Japan 4 years ago where they were putting up a new building, and the windows were glass and they were out like this, away from the building, which was down like this. And I'm walking past underneath it and I'm thinking, oh my God, if there was an earthquake, which Japan has all the time, that glass is just going to fall straight down on top of me, kind of thing. Bit scary, I must admit. But as I walked away, my spirit guide said, but what you don't understand is that each window is made to vibrate in the glass with the vibration of shifting and changing energy. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. What do you mean? And they said, well, think about a magnifying glass. It's bowed. Oh, okay. Well, I kind of got the gist of it, that when you make glass with certain orbs within that glass, it will distort your view through it, but however, it will let light in and it will fracture light and give a greater light into the room itself. So I understood that part, but I was still trying to understand what it actually meant to live with that kind of thing. I mean, imagine trying to clean that window to start off with. If you're inside the building, crawling onto this window that's going out at this angle, you would look down through that glass and feel like you're going to fall to your death or something. Hear my morbid thoughts. Okay? I want you to understand that we are naturally, by the nature of our upbringing, cautious, doubtful, insecure, unstable about dealing with the unknown. But if we don't try and explore these ideas that people are coming up with today, we would never find out the next stage in our evolution as human beings towards our greater evolution in the transform of our being to become what we might call today superhumans in the future, but who will just think of themselves as a human. I assume they won't change that word, but who knows, they may. Now, if we also think about the fact that we have 5 basic types of races of people on this planet, we can understand very thoroughly how our genetic DNA has been interacted with. In other words, we didn't just make ourselves look black or white or oriental and so on and so forth, the different races. We were genetically engineered, and we were genetically engineered by the Greys. So who are the Greys and what do they do? Well, people have given them different names. I'm not going to go into that because my spirit guides never gave me names for them. But they did say of them that they are not evil the way people think they are. They are telepathic, and everything that we believe has been done to us has been telepathically implanted into our mind is being done. So let's say someone tells you that they're going to open up your body right down the middle and they're going to move all your organs around in order to rearrange your body. You would be in fear. If they told you it was going to be painful, you would be in pain, in agony, and you would writhe on the table, and you would be emotionally, mentally, physically distraught, to say the least. So after all this is done, this little test in finding out your status in terms of balance between what you feel, what you think, and how your spirit self is balancing the two, was a big research. Why would they be researching our state of mind and emotions, our bodies and so on? Well, it's very simple. Their job, their task is to repopulate the universe with new species. This is the playing ground if you like, where we are tested. So if you think that you've been really interfered with, believe you me, you haven't gone through what you thought you had. My experiences are written in my journey into the oneness, okay? So you can read my stories there. But I will give one example where I had been held by nasty boys of my own age at the time in a spider's web bush where thousands of little baby ones were hatching out. I creeped and crawled in fear on that for days, weeks, years even, eventually. Until one day my spirit guides told me that this fear was taken by the Greys because they knew what my brain was thinking. They put me in a room that was completely white all over, and I was covered in spiders from head to foot, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, everywhere, and I was screaming my head off. And I remember that. But then my spirit guide showed me the end result that I didn't remember, which is suddenly all the spiders disappeared and I was in a completely white room. Okay, so I asked questions. Why was that happening to me? What was that for? And he said, to test my ability to overcome human fears. Now, you might say, well, why would they want to see how we handle human fears? Well, the bottom line is, if we have a great deal of fear, we're more likely to choose to commit suicide or drive our car over a cliff or something rather than face the hardships of survival. So what they were looking for during those years was people who are strong in will, who are strong in the psyche, who could understand tests of various kinds, emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually, and survive them. Those who survived were then chosen in different formats to teach, educate new generations that were being prepared to populate another planet elsewhere. I also hear a lot of stories about how women were made pregnant, their babies taken at 3 months, and babies then, seen as being an experimentation of reproduction. It wasn't that way at all. Babies were put into the wombs of women who were genetically engineered, and then those babies were half human, half alien, and then they were brought up on the spaceships, and people like me were taken up to the spaceships, and there we educated these halflings, as I called them back then, half Earth, half alien, and that was the word they had for them, and teach them how to use their emotions and not be telepathic all the time, because if you're going to populate another planet, you've got to be able to communicate, not just mentally, but intellectually, emotionally, to have the survival mode in order to create and build another planet. Now, this may sound far-fetched to you right now, but in time as we evolve, we will do the same. When we're happy to flip around from planet to planet, we will be taking people and testing them and populating their kids elsewhere. You might ask, why would that be? Well, the bottom line is, in our universe, there is nothing but growth. And growth comes by retardation. In other words, we're set back for a while. We face all sorts of fears, anxieties, worries, and so on. We face destruction here, i.e. wars, anything you can think of that is negative, and we survive it. And when we survive it, we are thinking about our lifestyle. We're thinking about how we're going to feed ourselves, clothe ourselves, build a house, and so on and so forth. So let me just surmise for a minute. If I could wave a magic wand at you and say that tomorrow there isn't a house standing anywhere in the world, but we've all survived, okay? We would immediately be saying, oh my God, I've got to find a tent. Well, what if there's not enough tents in the stores? We wouldn't find enough. This is very typical of what COVID is teaching us. We all rushed out to stock up our windows larders and block our windows from the sun coming in and getting any germs through the air or whatever it was that we thought we needed to do to protect ourselves from this germ. But in actual fact, this germ, this virus, is actually taking us to a new stage of evolution. If we didn't have a downfall, if we didn't have a cutting down of our numbers, we would continue to overpopulate this earth, and then we would have to have a mass evacuation. Many years ago, I started to write a novel, yet to be finished. In that novel, my person was going through different periods of history. I'm not telling you a story in case someone pinches it off me, but I knew that in writing that book, as I was writing it, that our time understanding, the way we focus on time, was wrong, and that time is all now. And my spirit guides embellished that as they were teaching me. And in time being all now, we can be in any dynamic and still age, depending on how much time we spend in different time areas, and then return to know more about the universe and the world that we live in. So one day when I'm ready, I'm going to finish that book. But for now, I just want you to think outside the box and realize that COVID is the question mark that has come up in our lives now. And as we know, we've lost a lot of the seniors, including my husband. COVID took away the people who were emotionally, mentally, physically ill. It also took away those who supported those who were emotionally, mentally, physically ill, because they were exhausted, tired and worn out, giving, and never thinking about themselves, always putting other people first. And of course that wore their bodies down, so they were tired and exhausted, and yes, open to some virus coming into their body where weakened systems were already breaking down, and so yes, we lost them too. But in the overview, we needed them to go because they're the old thinking patterns, the old ideas, the old beliefs in their own way, that the history was more important than what was the future to come. And here I want to say that it is very much the nature of mankind to harp on what was, complain about it, try and adapt away from it, and yet keep 90% of it sort of shuffle. It's like taking a pack of old regular cards, shuffling them, playing lots and lots of games, saying to yourself, well, one day I'll buy a new pack, and somehow you do buy a new pack, but the new pack doesn't quite feel right. You just don't want to play with them. They're still too stiff, and you forget that you had to work the original pack to get flexible. And so you keep on playing with the old playing cards, telling yourself that they're still good and you can still use them and they'll still be fine. Until you lose some, they tear or they fall apart beyond anything you control. And at that point you have to say, okay, I'm going to open that new pack of cards. Well, in a way, that's what our Earth is doing. It's saying enough. You've just destroyed the surface, you've destroyed the below the surface, i.e. mines, things like that. You've taken all the groundwater in greed to grow more and more food by supply and demand. You've changed the world by using coal, carbon, and all these gases are emitting up into our solar system. And even though Vice President Gould warned us all, nobody took any notice. His wording was right. His consciousness of how the temperatures would rise at this period in history was accurate. How did he know that? Because there were scientists researching it, which is data, and yep, there were many psychics who were giving this message as well. Did we listen? No. Why? Because we wanted things to stay the same. But when you look back over the last 40 years, let's go 50 years, okay, then we see, first of all, that our first communication was the phone, a very heavy old thing. And then we had car phones. And then we had things like use a free number and call in and get some help, guidance, advice on something or other. And then you get a nice big phone bill, and everybody couldn't pay those phone bills because they were too expensive. And so what happened? The phone companies had to lose their money, and up went the bills. This is very typical of how we've evolved through the Piscean age. It's I want, I'm going to get, I'm going to have, I'm going to get it, it's new, I must have it. And then you find out that what you've got is actually an eyesore that's caused more destruction than any growth. Now let us move into the technological age and talk about that. Hey, everybody wants a computer, everybody wants a cell phone, everybody wants to talk to everybody all the time. I mean, goodness knows why we have to tell everybody everything in every 5 minutes of the day. Personally, I don't do that, other than a few very close friends or my business colleagues. Then we need to communicate. But why do I want to read something about everybody else's ideas? Well, it's not really that I need their ideas, it's that I need to know they exist. And in knowing they exist, not to pitch them and make them spend all their money with me, which is what we went through the 20 to 2010, and people being taken to the cleaners, as we said in England, for all their money because they were so greedy to want more. So we saw the ending of the great Piscean age, where conquering, greed, control, manipulation, all these kinds of words were really slammed into our face to make us realize you can't be bought. What you need to get comes to you through the ways of the universe that is now guiding us spiritually in a way to understand our existence, and to realize that the great Piscean age of 3,500 years has set us in good stead. We've evolved a great deal. The Romans helped, the Greeks helped, the Egyptians helped, and we took their philosophy and their ideas of roads and bridges and so on and so forth, and we built upon that, and we made an even better architectural building. But does that mean it'll stand forever? Probably not. Why not? Because those buildings are, shall we say, fragile compared with the buildings of the ancient ones that are still standing. And when you think that the earth has been shaking and moving and twisting and turning throughout the solar system as it goes round and round the sun, being affected by all these solar storms and things like that, you can see why it is amazing that some of those ancient buildings still exist. So coming back to the Sphinx, my grandfather left me with a thought just before he died, that there is more to the pyramids. Well, I sat with my spirit guides and I asked them, what did they mean there's more to the pyramids? And they immediately started to give me information about the pyramids. And that was somewhere around, I think, the 60s, late 60s to 70s that my grandfather died. And that was the birth period of mind, body, spirit festivals in England, 10-day events, I might add, and boy, was I busy. And, you know, Aquarian festivals, New Age festivals of music and arts, and always the psychics were invited because they were considered the new novo thing to be. And me being very well known in England, it opened doors for me for Europe and other countries as well. And during that time, because I was so psychic, the first consciousness about the brain, I was the guinea pig. Whether it was at the university or whether it was at a mind expo or something, I was the tester. They would put their equipment on my head and ask me to think something. And there was one particular thing where they had the brain was on a mirror machine, you could see a central line and two sides of impulse lights or things underneath a glass that a normal person, when they're meditating, would have fluctuations on either side. And because I was trance medium, they asked me to go into trance. This is in the middle of an expo, people all around me, noise everywhere. It wasn't like meditation, deep breathing or anything, because I'm able to go into trance just like that. And so I did that for them. And I'm not out of body or anything, so I can hear what they're all saying, and I've got the spirit guides in my head as well. And this is what I heard. Oh, look, oh my goodness, how did she do that? Someone else said, she must have a spirit guide. Someone else was saying something about the left brain's not working, the right brain's taken over, and all these things. And I can hear that. Meanwhile, my spirit guides are laughing and saying, isn't this fun? Why don't you volunteer to be a guinea pig more often, and that way we can help you understand how the world is evolving. So I did. I became a guinea pig for a while, got bored with it after a while too. But the thing was, it taught me and confirmed to me in many ways, small itty bit pieces here and there, that what my spirit guides were telling me. And in those days it was Master Chang, Cornelius Tacitus, Sister Teresa, Kuan Yin. I didn't know it was Kuan Yin then, but she just called herself Yin. Things like that. People talking to me, telling me, this is going to happen, that was going to happen, go here, be a guinea pig, go there, don't do this, that's not right for you, and so on. And I was following what they were telling me to do. But what I was actually seeing was the progress of mankind. We came out of a war-torn world with hardly any technological equipment beyond the growth of tanks, guns, firearms and so on. Meanwhile, all the houses were being bombed and falling down and cities destroyed, i.e. eventually Japan, Hiroshima, and other places in the world, even today, like Afghanistan, which is basically mostly buildings all on the ground. So why, I wondered, are we so destructive? And Spirit said to me, well, you're not so much destructive as your instinct, your intuition within each race is encoded to know when the end of a cycle is coming, to rise up, complain, ask for changes, change the way one thinks, change the way one feels, open up the spirituality and begin to realize you've outgrown a certain age and now you move on to a new age. Okay, that was nice. I was talking about that for quite some time back in the 80s, 1980s onwards, when I arrived in America. And I thought pretty well, because I'd been through Europe and so on, that America would be way ahead of us. Wrong! They were just beginning to think about channeling. They were just beginning to think about psychic development. And the British team that put on the Mind, Body and Spirit expos in England for 10 days brought me over here to America as the keynote speaker for a 7-day event at the shrine. And I was doing the things I did in England that were so everybody knew about them, apropos to the times of our changes in England and Europe, to find that the Americans were like, wide-eyed, how can you do that? Nobody knew anything about the psychic ability in 1982. They began to know about meditation. There was a magazine, Whole Life Times, that I actually worked with for a while, helped them out and actually wrote columns and did paste-ups and things like that for the magazine as well. And during that time, I was talking to the staff there while they're putting all these little articles together, saying, well, someone said this and this, but I know this and this. And they're like, wide-eyed, how do you know? And I would explain to them, well, I don't know. The oneness knows. What's the oneness? So I had to explain that. Today, the word oneness is all over the world. But it was given to me by God when I was 4.5 years old, when my sister was born. That's how I know when it was. Again, that's in my life story book. But I'm not here promoting my book. I'm talking about our evolution. And I'm talking about this because I want you to understand we are not the, shall we say, earthlings that we believe we are, that just evolve. Our spirits have been in different types of bodies on this planet eons of time ago, long before we could even begin to imagine. We know the earth is billions of years old, so why couldn't we have incarnated here in different forms or come here from other planets? One of the memories I know of being here is Arcturian, and Arcturians of those times were 20 feet tall. Can you imagine being 20 feet tall? The earth had a much denser air atmosphere, and also, here's another one, the ancient Egyptians are so big, they were all carrying around these little purses, which were oscillators, so that they could make the atmosphere suit themselves. And they also had their little sticks, and those were vibrating, which allowed them to move from point A to point B instantly. Okay? So when we see Star Trek and people are energizing and disappearing and reappearing, it's not new. It's been done before. People are being given through their psyche, through creativity, through inspiration in our modalities of growth to make films like that, so that those who aren't thinking about it will sit there and go, I don't know why, but that feels familiar. And of course, today now, we have all sorts of organizations on UFOs. And if we go back only 20 years, we can still see everyone poo-pooing that aliens even exist. And people like Shirley MacLaine, who brought her book out and talked about Tara, who appeared to her up in Peru, who is an alien, an Arcturian, who can manifest on Earth as our forms, can change their forms. I've had people come up to me and say that they were petting horses in a field, and it seemed like the horses were talking to them, and they turned away to look at something else and turned back, no horses. I had an experience where I was driving with my husband through the desert, and on the way we realized we needed a drink, and we came across a shack. Two Mexican, a man and a woman, were there. We went inside. It was very old shack, looked pretty shabby. They had several cans of soda on a counter that looked like it had been built in 1920, and offered us the sodas. My husband gave them some money. They took it. There was no question of price. He just gave them whatever he had on us, and we left, and we thanked them very much, and they just looked normal human beings. Everything was normal. Even I had no suspicion other than to say to my husband, it's funny, why would anyone want to live out here in the middle of the desert? And reminding my husband we didn't have one of those sat things that tells you where you are, so we kind of got lost, and they gave us direction where to go up the road and do here and do there to get where we were going. So on the way back, my husband was good at remembering the way we'd come. We deliberately took a bunch of sodas with us to give them in thanks for giving us their sodas while we were there. Well, there was no shack. It didn't exist. And as we got home, I thought to myself, something happened there. I knew without knowing that somehow I had more conscious awareness of my psyche than I'd had earlier. And this is in the early years, somewhere around 1983. So I was still evolving. I wasn't as psychic or as everything as I am today. I was still flowing from the spiritualists in England to proving survival after death, doing tarot readings, teaching people how to be psychic, those kind of things, dealing with people's everyday issues and so on and so forth. And so that was the beginning of my thinking, those people were not really alive on earth. Those had to be spirits. And of course, when I asked my spirit guides who were they, said, well, it was us, of course. I said, what do you mean us, of course? Well, we can come into form anytime we want to, but we don't need to, because if we all turned up in form and talked to you all, you wouldn't believe we're spirit guides, and you wouldn't listen to us, and you would go merrily on your way doing all the wrong things. So we very rarely come into body form unless it's an emergency. You were in an emergency. You were in the middle of nowhere with no water, no soda, nothing. So we directed you back to where you would be safe. That makes sense. Thank you very much. Another time, my husband had dropped me off at the airport, and he was coming back home late at night, and he suddenly noticed a spaceship was following him. I asked him if he remembered stopping or getting out and looking at it or anything. He said, no, I just was looking out the window watching it follow me. So I said, you didn't stop, you didn't miss time, nothing like that? He said, no. So about 3 days later, he came back to me and he said, you know, I've been thinking about what you said. He said, I can't remember anything about where I was coming from or where I was going. All I could remember was I'd left you and I was on my way home and this thing was following me. Do you think something else happened? Well, I said, I can't tell you. Only you can go inward, talk to your spirit guides and see what they say. Well, unfortunately, my husband was not one who could really meditate, so 9 times out of 10 he fell asleep. And so we never found the answer to that. So I asked for him in a reading. My spirit guide said he was actually checked out, his heart was healed, and his nervous system was redirected. And when I thought about it at that time, he had had a lot of backache, and he had gained too much weight. It was some 20 years later that he had his first heart attack. I asked Spirit at that time, is that what you were preventing? And all I got was yes. Okay, so I want you to understand that here that spirit guides have a purpose when they appear to you in real form, whether they appear to you as an ancient alien or a grey, or, you know, someone says they look like mantas, you know, these insects and things. I have to admit, I've never seen anyone looking like an insect. I've never seen anyone on a planet when I do go out of body with spirit guides sometimes. I've never seen anyone living on Mars. People tell me they were in this world and then taken back in time to Mars, lived there for 30 years doing something or other, and then brought back to this world into their young body. I cannot disprove that, but when I ask Spirit, they just are silent. And I've learned through the years that when they say nothing, it means that the story is of no value. I'm just one person saying this, but I'm sure the oneness is probably telling other people too. So what do we see here? We have been through a tremendous amount of creative imagination since World War II, Vietnam, and any other wars that have been going on since in the Middle East. We have become inventive according to our needs. Now, if I flip back into India and the ancient documents and paintings and things of, say, Rembrandt or different people, somehow they always slip in somewhere angels flying on carpets, or people in round balls looking like they're in an arrow or something in these artworks. So those people must have been seeing, they're creative, artistic, talented, and must have been able to be psychic. If we go into Nostradamus, if we go into Michelangelo, all these people were inspired by the oneness through their psyche to do those things. And when I do psychic drawing, if I'm working with the oneness and my spirit guides, my drawings are perfect. If I say leave me alone, and I have studied art and got my exam arts, in design, I can make lots of mistakes. I'm erasing and redoing, erasing and redoing. And I've tested that, and then I've gone back and said, okay, Spirit, finish this drawing for me, and I've drawn it perfectly, after I've struggled trying to draw it perfectly. So I've proved to myself that my talents come through the oneness, through my spirit guides, guardian angels, many, many times. And all these books that I have published, all 18 of them, except my life story, even my novels that I've not finished yet, are all channeled through the oneness. And every book that I have is full of information that the oneness has given me to share with you so that you can read it and learn. Now, there are many, many people on earth right now who are working on sound. When I was first talking about sound as the new age of energy source, back in the 1970s, people thought I was an idiot. And it was hurtful to me, being honest, because when you think you've got a gift for the world and you're trying to share it, and all their people are just looking at you like you're insane, and what are you doing here? That'll never be possible. Sound just plays, it's music, it's a resonation. We've got radio waves, we know about that, and we've got Morse code, and we know about that. But the idea of being able to reverberate energy in such a way that we could lift off a rocket to space, or we could heat our houses, impossible. And yet here we are today, as I said on the show with Katie, when we do Dr. Margaret and Dr. Katie Speaks every Saturday live, which you might like to go to. I want you to understand that being a pioneer and knowing things for the future is very, very important right now, since the Great Piscean Age, I have to emphasize that, has ended, and we are now in the Great Aquarian Age. Aquarius is air. Air resonates, reverberates, it creates friction within itself. That makes our hair stand on edge. So we know about static electricity. What we have to learn is how to use that and tap into it. We also know that if we put sand on a drum and blast out some music next to that drum, the sand will go into geometrical shapes. And it's very interesting. In fact, there's some videos online I saw years ago, which you might want to search for and watch, because it'll make you understand that we are on the edge of discovering how sound is going to lift off those rockets to space. Okay, step back 3 paces for a minute. How did I know that? Because that's how the aliens fly their spaceships, how they can travel so fast. They are making their magnets, the giant magnets in their spaceships, reverberate and ride on the light waves through the vibration and resonation of sound. Okay? Now, I'm not a scientist. I can't prove that works or doesn't work, but I can tell you at least, and maybe someone who's listening to this will go in and write something out. Because of that, I wrote a book from Spirit called Quantum Entanglement, A Paranormal Point of View. If you're interested in sound and you'd like to know how it's affected us and how it will affect us in the future, that's a book to read. You can download the ebook. I think it's back up again as a softback. Katie Kamara is redoing all my books for me since my husband died. And, it's a slow process with COVID and all the things that have been happening. So we're behind our original date by a year. Every time we think we're going to get done, because there's so much to do in building a university online, something happens. And that's the way of these times. And I'm sure all of you listening or watching this understand that you start to do something, you've got plans for the week, and something goes wrong, like your computer goes down because the web is down, or your electricity blows out because the weather's too hot. There's so many different things that seem to be destructive, but actually I see them as, hey, stop trying to run before you can walk. Slow down, take your time. There is no reason to rush. The dawning of the Aquarian age is in birthing mode. And when something is in birthing mode, it's a struggle to survive, to live. And so the earth is struggling to find its balance. And we who live on the back of this earth are struggling to keep our own balance with our feet on the ground. So while we're busy waiting for a time when it's going to be easier to manifest and do things, we are supposed to be A, researching ourselves, B, listening to other people's researches, sharing our researches, combining our effort, and coming up with new creations that will set the pace for the coming growth of the next 3,260 something odd years. Okay? So everything that we're going through right now is the destruction of the Piscean age. We don't need it anymore. Just as the same as we've gone through the destruction in the past of the Taurian and Aryan age. Okay? We have to realize that what they did back then doesn't suit us for what we're doing now in the Aquarian age. We don't remember too much about those great ages in the past if we didn't have the buildings, or if we hadn't found bones of ancient animals even further back throughout time, because prehistoric is so long ago, millions, billions of years, whatever, we can't conceive it. We don't know. But I do tell you this, that they said of that time when I was in school, that there was no humans on this planet when those creatures roamed. They were here. They were here. Okay? So we have had humans, or people like us, not necessarily humans in the way we are today, but a species living here who were surviving in those times. So that was basic, wasn't it? How do you survive? How do you find your food? You live with it, you adapt, you do the best you can. So coming back to now and the Aquarian age and COVID, I would really like to help you to understand that as much as it is awful to lose our loved ones, it is a blessing it's here, because it's telling us to stop destroying ourselves, to stop destroying this earth, to take stock of our journey thus far in the overlap of the Piscean age into the Aquarian age, and understand that this is the beginning of a new beginning. Now, a new beginning, we'll go into the Bible here. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was a vibration, etc. In my book, Journey into, what is it called now? We've changed the name. Journey into an Unknown World, The Way to Oneness Revisited. It was originally published in German and then by me in English, and it was very dry as channeled by me handwriting it, because no, I didn't have a computer then, and published around 1983. Years later, I redid it, padded it with some of my stories to show how I was working and doing the book at the time, and added some channeling that I had done during those years. And it's now 500 odd pages full of meditations to do and instructions on therapies and different things. So it's more informative. And if you are a student of the oneness, that is a book to get. It's a life book. You can always go back to it and learn from it over and over again, because even I learned from it, and I'm the one who wrote it. But I have to tell you that when I channel these books, I'm all knowing, all knowledgeable, all wise, and when I'm teaching the classes, I know everything, because spirit guides are in my body, in my head, they're with me. Margaret on her own in the kitchen? Duh! What did I put in that book? What did I say? I can't remember. I've just said to Katie, I need to reread all my books, okay? Because as I finish one, I'm moving on to the next one, because Spirit want me to bring all this information to the world. And of course, I'm 1 year away from 80 now, and so I've got to, make sure I get all this information out to the peoples of the world, and hopefully they won't poo-poo it, they'll work with it, and the younger generations that I've trained will go on to train their younger generations. And so over time, me and thousands of others like me who have come down to do this job will leave their hereditary self, as it were, and their blessings of their gifts to the peoples of the future. When I say hereditary self, well, it's in my kids, and my grandkids are already showing their psyche and their abilities, and they're already saying they want to do things to save the world, repair the world, heal the world. All over the world there are teenagers who will soon be mums, dads, who are talking about cleaning up the oceans, not making plastic anymore. All these things that we have done through the Piscean age need to be gotten rid of. Okay? Why do we have to have paper? Originally, people wrote on the animal skins. Well, maybe there wasn't such a demand in those days, because most people, unless they were scholars or senators or something, couldn't write. They just marked their X, and someone told them what the writing meant. Well, let's come forward in time to the 1800s, and again, that most people there communists couldn't write. It was only the upper echelon of society who were educated to read and write. Schools, kids were put in school in the late 1900s for 2 years to read and write, period. They didn't get geography, history, anatomy, biology, none of that. When I went into school, we got everything. I had a good upbringing. Not only did I get all the intellectual side of things, not that I needed it all, because I already knew I didn't need geography, for example, or what was going on in terms of society all over the world. I was working with England, so my focus was on England. Then Europe came, then my focus was on Europe, and then I went elsewhere, and so on and so forth. And so my focus grew and grew as I evolved. And as I evolved, I was able to bring to the world more information from the oneness through the mode of spirit guides, guardian angels, master teachers, ascended ones, and so on. So what are we doing now? Well, basically, COVID is cutting our numbers down. The world shifting its axis by fire, accidents, water, floods, these kinds of things, a dam breaking out of the blue, pressure from illnesses and other diseases in the world. We've had the AIDS. We've got Africa absolutely laden down right now with not only COVID but many other illnesses and diseases. Too many to mention. So what are we doing? We're being pruned back by illness and disease. Did someone spread it to cut our numbers down? Well, yes, they may have, but not necessarily deliberately, but mostly by accidents. If you're working in a laboratory, no matter how much you try to be careful in yourself and protecting yourself from, say, these deadly viruses that they have created through the 1900s, then you wash and do all this and that, and hey presto, out of the blue, one person makes one tiny mistake, i.e. you might have seen it in a movie, and that little bug gets into their suit. They don't know. They go home, and next thing you know, there's an epidemic of people falling down, hair falling out, and everybody says, oh, it's radiation. But no, it wasn't. It was another bug. Okay? But nobody knew about the bugs then. It was secret. Hush, hush. Oh, okay, it's SARS. Oh, it's this. And now here we are in speculation, hearsay. And I did do a show last week on hearsay also. What is hearsay? It's I hear and I say it. I pass it on to someone else. Why do I pass it on? Maybe because I believe it, maybe because I think it's silly and it's rubbish and I'm trying to share that with other people, or maybe I'm neutral and I'm wondering, I'm not sure which way the cookie crumbles. Well, we're all like that, and if we don't watch it because we don't find out the bottom line, or because something is so covered up in some way that we can't get to the truth, i.e. the forces here in America telling everyone there's no spaceship, it's just a balloon. Well, who are these people who think they can block our minds and our heart and soul from what we really see and what we know? Well, that was the Piscean age. But in the Aquarian age, it's going to be different. We're going to be saying, tell me what you saw. I want to know exactly. Tell me if you smelt something. Tell me if you felt something. Tell me how they talked to you. Was it in your language or was it in click, 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 click? That means I've got something to tell you and I want to share it with you, but are you ready to receive it? That is speaking the grey tongue. I can do it without thinking about it. Don't have to translate it. Like if I speak French, I have to think English. I'm going to excusez-moi, voulez-vous parler-moi un peu? Will you speak to me a little bit in French? Well, I learned French years ago, but I forgot it all. And recently, one of my spirit guides who used to talk to me in French when I was a teenager, Pierre, has come back. And he's reminding me. And I've noticed when he's talking to me, I'm fluent. But when I want to speak it, it's coming slowly. So what I want you to understand here is judgment is something that has to go in the Aquarian age. We cannot judge, especially on hearsay, without facts. We need to have open communications so that we can say, I heard this from the person who invented it. In other words, we have to have open doors, open books, open anything for someone who can stand up and say, I have done this research and it's everything here that I've found, and I'm looking for someone who's doing similar research to join me, and together we can validate what each of us has done, and from validation, not hide it away and say nobody's going to get this information till we get millions of dollars, but rather open up again and say, hey, we've come together, we've got this much, anyone out there got something to add to it? We're wide open, we're ready to receive. Now, if I had enough hands, I would have hundreds of hands here, all coming together on a project to make it in open discussion that anybody, you and I, a kid at school, if it's relative and not something too scary or whatever, for anyone and everyone to know what research is being done. The Piscean age said be secret. We got wars going on. We got spies coming and going. We got the Cold War, for example, in our time. We have to realize that this kind of covert working from the Piscean age needs to go. As long as we believe that we will be invaded, bombed, blah, blah, blah from the Piscean age and carry that into the Aquarian age, we are causing the Aquarian age to just expand and combust, if you like, before it's even started. However, that doesn't mean it won't rise again. The phoenix always rises, okay? So what I'm nervous about is that people, especially with the Middle East, India being so close to Pakistan and all this area here, and the Muslim belief, because you know when Muhammad, I will say here, when he was talking to me, when he put all these thoughts together, his idea was to lay before the people a way to think things through in alternatives of individuals. So if Christ said ABC and someone else, let's say Siddhartha Buddha or Melchizedek said something similar but not the same, how do you deduce those words of those times into the words of modern idioms today? So when you read the translations, for example, of the Christian Bible, you're not even reading the original books that were put out in the turn of the Roman power in the early AD period. Unless you're a scholar who can go and read the Latin and whatever else, Greeks and Romans works, Italian works, you're not going to know what those books really said. Now, I've got a big book called the Urantia book that came out, again, probably in the 80s. I have to admit, I've never read it because I didn't have time, because when you look at it, it's paper thin like the Bibles, and it's that thick. It's off-putting to know there's so much to read and study. But what I have done is go and read about the apostles, go and read about the beginning of time, just recently. And you know what? It's written there, what I'm saying to you. So I've got that far, and I've got myself that little bit of confirmation from some wonderful people, whoever they were, who never gave their names, doesn't tell you who was writing, channeling those words. But I respect channeling because I'm a channel medium myself. So all those books prove it, that you could read any time you want to, and are informative and educational. But hey, I realize that many of my books are not read by everyone because I don't pitch them. I don't say, here's my book, it's a special offer today, and next week it'll be $20 again, but you can have it for $1 today. I just got a price stuck there. It's up to you if you want to read it or not, because it appeals to you, because your instinct, your intuition, your psyche, your lifestyles, your issues call you to want to read it. And if you are being called that way, then it will have a lasting effect on you, because Spirit Guides wrote it through me, and it will lead you towards your changes and your transitions in the way you see yourself in this world and your part in this world. So let me use some examples of what's going on since the COVID has practically cut every country in the world down to size. Okay? Revolutions are happening. People in different countries are saying they want their leaders put aside because they're not leading. They're controlling, manipulating the peoples of that country. They don't want that anymore. They want the freedom of speech. They want to pick out new leaders who are open to the freedom of speech. They want to have freedom of businesses and so on according to what they need. There are models in the world still of the old Piscean age, i.e. Korea. There are models with Afghanistan of destruction. We will not get over those in a hurry, but given time, those will change. I have seen a vision of Afghanistan totally flattened and regrowing again, the trees, the parks, and things like that. But right now it's hard to even believe in an arid land that could be there. But hey, if the earth is shifting a few degrees, that's going to change the weather patterns. And land that is fertile might be dry in the future. And land that is dry now may be fertile. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, it's not like overnight. It will be gradual, just as Gore, Vice President Gore was saying the world is coming to a heat wave situation where we're destroying it. And his words were right. Okay? So we have to understand that we can't stop nature from doing what it needs to do. And since we're like a flea on the back of a dog, we have to stay on the dog. That's our survival mode. So in our way, we have to stay on the earth. We have to reincarnate, and we'll come and go as we have done before. And we will bring changes to each generation as they evolve, and we will see more and more happening in the future where harmony is now the way. I will say that we saw that movie where there was no land anymore, there was only water, and the premise, I think, behind that movie was all the ice caps had melted. Well, I asked Spirit about that at the time, and they said, what you lose in one place, you gain on the swings on the roundabouts, an expression we have in England. You might play on the swing, but you're not having a go on the roundabout. If you're on the roundabout, you might miss a go on the swing, but either way, you're having fun. So life is up and down, and ultimately, you go through those ups and downs, and you find the harmony, the balance between the two. And when you look at SARS and COVID that has been brought to us, when I have to tell a story here. When I went to Japan in the middle of the SARS, I got on the plane. There were a few other people on the plane, but there was probably 80% empty chairs. Great, I could sleep all over the place and go anywhere and eat anywhere and sit first class. They didn't care, and enjoy the flight. And when I got to Japan, all the people who were on the plane with me went off to a second flight. I continued on to get my case. And when I got to go through customs, I was the only one. There wasn't even a Japanese person there. I was the only one that went through customs. And when I got through on the other side, I came down to see only one case, my case, going round on the roundabout, and a notice with my name say, "See personnel." So I got to personnel, two small Japanese women, about 4'5" high, a good foot smaller than me at the time, bowing like this, because this was a way of the time then, and apologizing profusely that they'd lost my other case and that it had gone on to another country, and that they would bring it back to me and deliver it to me at my address where I was staying the next day. Did I have a fear that I would catch the flu bug? No! Why? Because I was taking, even in those days, colloidal silver now and again to kill any bugs in my body, which is why I don't look 79 years old. I am healthy. I just had my blood test recently, and my doctor said to me, "What did you do? All your numbers are exactly in the middle." And I said, well, I take colloidal silver in distilled water every so often when I want to clean out any bugs I think I might have. I take slippery elm, which is a balm on an empty stomach, and if I've got any sores or anything in my digestive tract, it will balm it and it will heal. And so my digestive tract's doing well. Colloidal silver cleans out all your blood vessels, so you don't have any LDLs. Yeah. So, and I'm vital. The only thing I have is sometimes my brain is overloaded with spirit guides and me, and I've lost a word. And I don't like that, because I like to have all the words at the tip of my tongue. But Spirit said, slow down. You're not in a rush to teach everyone everything. Do what you can when you want, as you can. Here it is, 11 p.m. at night, and I've been talking to you for an hour or so, and I'm not tired. I'm sparky, I'm alert, and I'm happy to do this, because this is a peaceful time. No phones, no spam on my phone, nobody calling me, "Help me, I'm about to commit suicide if you don't help me," or "I need a reading right now because I've got this big thing happening, and if I don't have an answer by 3 o'clock, I'm going downhill, I'm losing all my money." You'll be amazed what people write to me about, and I answer them all. And usually Oneness will answer it very simply, i.e., I'm losing all my money. That particular person, I was able to tell them, stop worrying, just pull in your resources, say, I'm shutting the window, as it were, of business for a week, and in a week's time, you'll find everything's back to normal. Will that happen? So, we have to realize that when our mind in judgment and listening to hearsay runs away with us, we get lost. We feel we're losing our world of stability. We feel that we have nothing to offer the future. We want to give up and quit. Well, okay, in a way you can quit, because quit means you're not going to do things the way you've done them in the Piscean age. And while you're on quitting mode, you're in resource mode to find out what else is going on out there. And once you do educate yourself to other things, you'll find your inspiration, your instinct to know more will lead you emotionally to want to ask questions. And when you do ask those questions, zip this and listen and listen and listen. Have a pad, write each question down. Because I know by my husband, when he was alive, I would be teaching and he'd want to keep putting his hand up. And I'd stop and say, yes. He'd ask a question and I'd say, well, I was just about to explain that part. He learned over time, stop asking questions, because Margaret knows, the oneness knows, spirit guides knows, what's in everybody's head. And so if you listen to the entire talk and make notes, you're writing it down, you're teaching a conscious mind through eyes and hearing to remember. But if you are running on at the mind of, I need that question answered, this immediate question that came up, and I'm going to think about that question, you go off on the sidebar, you've missed the rest of the talk, and no, you don't remember. And you've lost a lot. Now you go into hearsay. Well, I heard bits and pieces, I put it all together, my bits and pieces equals an equation. This is my truth. I'll now share this with 900 other people on Facebook or somewhere and spread that out as gospel. And those people who haven't done anything, not taught anything, not been anywhere, go, oh, this person's talking facts. I'll share it some more. And before you know where you are, we're all believing a load of hearsay, and we don't know what is facts, what is real, and what is false. So I'm saying to you now, with the leaders that come in the future, to basically listen, write notes down, ask your spirit guides questions on it if you are psychic in that sense, and get the real truth from the oneness. When you've got that, don't rush to put it up online. I didn't have online. I mused on it, okay, until it made sense. Sometimes spirit guides would just give you parts of a situation, and then something else will happen in the world, and then they give you another bit of that situation. It's like having a puzzle. And it's not till you have all the pieces of the puzzle together that you will truly know the facts. And that requires you to be an investigator and to talk, ask questions of people who have many different ideas, and ultimately you could even record it if they allow you, go home and listen to them all and do your research as to what is similar as of what is outstandingly different. Now, if outstandingly different feels negative and you can't handle it, put it down. Because it might be such a change in force energy in terms of the future that it's scaring you right now, because you can't imagine that kind of change. For example, people came to me about Bitcoin. Right now, apparently it's quite worth something. But what happens when the dollar crashes? Okay? Things come and go. So be sensible. If your instinct tells you that you should hold on to your Bitcoins, hold on to them. If it says get rid of them, get rid of them. Don't worry about whether you get 10 cents on the dollar or a dollar, per dollar. It's not about making money right now. It's about trusting your instincts, your intuition, really researching, understanding the facts, and then making your choice. It's not about pray to God, please bring me all the money I need when I put them up for sale on eBay. Okay? Doesn't work that way. God is not interested, or the oneness is not interested in how rich you are. If they know you need money, i.e. I've asked for money for me to build the university online so I can pay the teachers and people who will come to teach. And what did they turn around and say? Stop worrying about that. What you need we will give you when it's the right moment and the right time to do it. So I'm not worrying about it now. But I do say online, any millionaires, billionaires, or anyone out there who is instinctively feeling they want to support the growth of the great Aquarian age and the education of metaphysical studies, including metaphysical health treatments, medicine, all these different things, contact me and we'll see where we go, if we got like minds and if we are wanting to do the same thing. Why? Because birds of a feather flock together. And when you get a team, and here I'm going to say Oprah Winfrey, who's an amazing woman, and her partner who helped all the way through that behind stage, got together in their little room from a very ordinary show done in public access, just like I did, and got the right people coming to help her, all women by the way, from what I can see mostly, to make her show so successful at a time when it needed to be successful, for people to explore and understand what she was exploring and understanding, which brought an awakening to our world about alternative therapy, different modalities of consciousness, books to read, music to listen, the list goes on. Her work was so precious. There were many people who said to me, Margaret, you should be on her show, who actually sent stuff about me to her people. And I just said, well, thank you if you want to do that. I appreciate that because I respect her and honor her for all she's doing. But I doubt I'll ever hear anything because I'm too far advanced for where she was working at that time. And now it's wonderful. She's talking realism to, for example, Prince Harry and Meghan, and which call her princess, I suppose, I don't know. They keep changing titles, don't they? This is very typical of the monarchy of ages past, of the Piscean age. And of course, we're looking at young William, who will be king one day, and he's not of the essence of royalty in the way of what was. He's out there with the people, he's had nights out in the bars, and so has Harry, and they're different. So it'll be interesting to see how my birth country will change. In the same way, we're looking at Europe doing the same. We're looking at Africa doing the same. There isn't a continent that isn't in the mode of change. And I herald that by saying very strongly, the oneness knows what it's doing, and I'm just the spokesman for that. And anyone who's listening who is of a like mind with me, I'd love to hear from you. My email address for me privately, which is now being invaded by spam people, unfortunately, but it's PROF for Professor, then Margaret, MARGARET. My initials are VC for Rogers Van Coops @gmail.com. Please write to me and put, I've listened to your show, contact me, or something like that, so I know, because if you don't, spam, my girls just delete it and I'll never even see it. So please write in the top story where you're sending to me, you want to talk to me, contact me for a counsel, a reading, or a talk. Something that it makes it clear. Otherwise, you'll never hear from me. I'm sorry. But that's the way of life, because unfortunately, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all these things are now controlled by one major conglomerate of people who are so scared about any new age or new thing, i.e. my COVID book. I'll mention it here again. Get out of my head for a minute so I can think. Okay. All right, I have to say what they're saying first. This book is very important, they believe, because they wouldn't have given it to me otherwise. And there's Jesus speaking in there with God as well. There's, okay, what? All right, this now saying you don't need to mention all our names. Okay, so we're talking about the coronavirus explained. That's the book that they wrote through me. There are 80 pages. They've signed it, their names at the bottom of the end of what they've written, all about now and into the future and the heralding of what will come after COVID is calmed down. So what we're looking at is an evolvement into the Aquarian age, and it is free. Now, Amazon won't let me put it up. We've tried and tried, and Katie has tried and tried. So we're giving it away from our website, sumariseducationcenter.com. You can go there. You need to put in your name, full name, because I've got an address to send it to, your email so I can send it to you, your phone number if you want to talk about it, and why you're interested in it. Now, if you speak a foreign language, I mentioned that earlier, you're easy, free to translate it. All I ask is you send it to me so I can put that up for people and share it on my page so that people can see it in a different language so they can read it. The more we share it, the oneness doesn't want any pennies for it. I don't want any pennies for it, so nor does Katie. So the more we can share it, if it's only meant to go out as an ebook, then let it be so. And if you the time and patience and are a translator to put it into another language, much appreciate that from the oneness. But you will be inspired, of course, because the oneness will be connecting with you and wanting you to do it. So here I'm saying there are no accidents from the oneness. We all come into embodiment with a coding, a soul coding, which you can read about in the books I've mentioned earlier. There's the book, The Way to Oneness, Revisited. I mentioned that, my journey into... Oh, I've got too many books. It's overwhelming. Another book that would help you is The Rejection Syndrome, that actually explains the soul structure coding. And then you'll start thinking about yourself as not such an everyday person who was just born out of mum and brought up by mum and daddy or step-parents or foster parents or whatever it is. You will be thinking, I've got genes of those people. I've got their talents. I've got their skills. I've got their insecurities. I've got their fears, their pain, their anger, their guilt, their treasures, their evolvements in ascension, their oneness. It's all in me. All I have to do is dig inside myself to find it and birth it forward through my conscious mind from the deep subconscious back here in images somewhere in the middle of my brain to remind myself that I have this knowledge. Okay? There's a program that was put out recently where under hypnosis one can tap into that. I did get the program. I've been too busy to even try it myself. However, a part of it is that you can download someone you admire's mind from the oneness, because all things are recorded in the oneness, and bring it into yourself as your own consciousness and suddenly become a whiz kid. So for example, if you've never been able to paint and you wanted to download the artistic talents of Rembrandt, then you do that, and then hey presto, next time you buy some paint you suddenly find you can do it. Isn't that nice? Well, the Aquarian age brings that to us, because it's connecting us all through the oneness to know that we're never alone and that we can harmonize with anyone we choose to harmonize with. But if our mind is running away, as it has been, with all our fear, pain, anger and guilt and loss throughout all these wars and throughout all these money battles and fluctuations of rich and poor, and whether this religion is better than that religion and so on, we were totally in the Pisces age, lost in confusion by the concepts of competition. I'm better than you, my religion's better than that one, and so on. You get the idea. The Aquarian age is not about that. The Aquarian age is about, okay, so I was brought up Muslim. I want to hear what Christian is about. What exactly is the core of Christianity? Where did it come from? How would it influence my philosophy and theology born out of Muhammad, who left us to question our every breath, our every thought, our every action, our every deed? So why aren't we doing that? Of course, some of them are, and they're great Muslims. But the ones who are like ISIS and but I'm sorry, again, I'm losing words and spirits in my head. They're saying stay off politics. So, but those, warfaring people who are still trying to control the world are actually doing this not to control us. They'll pass away once they do what they're meant to do, which is stop the madness of the Piscean age. So the old ways go, they pass away. They're just the flux and energy of change. And when they're gone, then the new awareness will arise through the children being born later in the world to come. And by then, those will be encoded with new ambience of harmony with one another. The world will have settled down a great deal in terms of rejuvenating itself. We won't have so much earthquakes and stuff because it will have done its thing and now we're quiet again. So, we've got to be patient with the evolution of mankind, patient with the earth as it evolves in rejuvenation. And we've also got to be patient with the aspects of space and time and aliens and all these ideas. Right now we're in a lot of fantasy. I know there are great conventions and people are telling you all sorts of stories about things that happened to them. But I do say caution, 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 because a lot of what they believe was done to them was done in the mind mentally and not anatomically to the body. However, yes, we have got in our bodies little biotechnical things, like we're talking about nanobites or whatever they're called, which will help repair the body, and we're accepting that, and science is working on that. But we have to realize that the way we see them is they're always keeping us healthy. Well, once they've done their job and rejuvenate us, why do we still want to have these foreign things running around controlling our body and repairing us? We need to repair ourselves. So this is just a step in evolution, in understanding that we can rebuild our bodies. Now, if we'd have said to someone back in, let's say, 1950s to 60s, that we could go into the womb of a woman with microscopic surgery and make sure a certain gene does grow in the right way so that the baby comes out normal instead of encaphalectic, we would have said back in those days, impossible, that can't be done, it would kill the baby the minute you stick a needle in. Or the mother would go into some terrible infection or something and die. And yet today, it's done quite frequently. Surgery on babies, especially in the heart area, is done to, because a lot of babies are born with holes in the heart, as they call it, which is the blood vessels are not quite fully formed. So, yeah, we've learned a great deal and we'll continue to learn a great deal, but we can't learn it and not share it. We must share what we know. So every country will say, we've got what you've got, so why would we go to war? Everything we have got that's new, we tell everyone else, and everyone else is grateful, vice versa, on and off. Integration, and of course integration of our species that we're seeing. We're no longer, those of us who are aware, are talking of black, white, pink, yellow, blue, purple, whatever it is. We're just saying we're one race, the human race. But why do we have to define a person is, from Africa, or a person is from India or whatever? Well, we could pretty well tell by speech patterns when we listen to them on the phone. But I will say this, in England, if I'm talking to a black person who's been brought up in England, or a Chinese person and so on, I'm talking to them, they sound as English as I do. I can't tell what colour their skin is, and I wouldn't want to, because then when I meet them, I'm not meeting a coloured person or a yellow person or a red person or whatever it is. I'm meeting Jane, Tom, Dick, whatever it is, and Mary, Ann and Ethel. And hey, how are you and what do you do? Love to know about you. And yeah, we sit down and we share. Well, my mum comes from India and my dad comes from Africa. And so I've got this and that philosophy. Oh, really? I'd like to hear about that. Tell me what it's like, because I've never been there and I haven't seen that and I want to know what it's like. Oh, well, it's this and this and that and that. Okay, That's how we have to learn to be with one another, okay? We have to realize we don't need violence. We have to realize that we don't need to be treated badly, that we don't need to, i.e. the book, The Burning Bed, set our husband on fire to escape him. Women and men are equal today, and it's time the rest of the world who doesn't know it knew it. And everyone has a place in society to build us towards the unification of mankind. So what we see in battles, in starvation, in loss and all these things is the pruning down of the Piscean age and of the people born of that age. And what we're coming to now is the new babies that are arriving, and hey, aren't they brilliant? 2 years old, they're on mummy's phone playing all those video games already. I'm still looking at a video going, oh, what button do I push? I can't do it. My generation doesn't have that coding in my brain box, but the babies born today do. And they want their questions answered honestly, truthfully, face to face, eye to eye contact. And the teachers need to be kind and soft and tender. My dad told me that when he was 4 and came back on a ship from India to England for prep school, as they called it, 5 years old, which was a boarding school, had to wear a little grey hat, grey suit, shorts and things, gets to school, and the teacher could hit their hands with the ruler, and if they were cried, hit their butts with the ruler. A 5-year-old. Okay? Now today, i.e. one of my sons was being yelled at by his son, and he was very rude and aggressive, according to my son, and so he slapped him. Just slapped him. And my grandson called the police. Of course, the police heard the story and said, no, there's no abuse here. But we've gone from one extreme to the other. There must be some way of bringing up children with awareness and giving the psyche like I had. I had a lot of lectures from my father, a lot of talks from my mother growing up. I was quiet and I listened because I was the eldest. My sister had the same, but much less than I had, because the tradition in those days was the older leads the way. Okay, the prince, the eldest prince becomes the king, or the eldest princess becomes the queen. Okay, so that tradition was instilled into me. I'm the eldest, I'm most responsible. So my sister got away with so many things I couldn't. And she's a free spirit today, and a medium as well. So what we have to understand here is if we bring up the children with the wisdom of today, of the metaphysical studies, then there are many, many available. Then these children have a big start in growing up to be physicians of the world in a variety of ways, where they're healing the world, they're healing their neighbors, they're healing one another in families. Families get along. Church, religions, in some way integrated to such a point that we actually feel that we are evolving to unity on this planet. And when we get to that point, in about 150 years from now, we will start to say, this world is repairing itself. Unfortunately, it's going to take that long. So be patient. Be patient with your children. Be patient with the people who are in politics right now, because they're just doing what they think is best to do. Some of us know it's not going to work, but that's okay. We can't talk them out of it. It's a step of going through what doesn't work in order to wash away that, to eventually open up new ways, which will trial and effort will become, we have to fiddle and twiddle around till we get it right. But once we do, then we will have something that works for those generations to come. And by then, those will be your great-great-grandchildren, I think. Okay, so on that long lecture, nearly 2 hours, I want to say thank you for staying with me that long. on Journey into an Unknown World, and I hope that I've taken you partly into what is known and what is not known to understand that our buildings, the way we live, the flights to space, the healing, the way the world is run, there's so much coming to change. So stop holding on to the past. Be, shall we say, a brave person today. Put all your arguments aside. Open up your brain and say, what's new? I'm going to read, I'm going to learn, and I'm going to understand. But most important, I'm not going to get into hearsay. I'm going to look for facts. And facts come from those who study. And they study hard and they study well. And yes, there are people who try to shut them up. But they are a voice in the darkness right now. But in time, they'll be the voice of light. So on that note, I say thank you for listening to me. And do contact me, either Professor Margaret, rvc@gmail.com, or Dr. Margaret, rvc@gmail.com, or even better, go to sumariseducationcenter.com, sign up for further free talks and education, or go to universalchristchurch.com if you want education in spiritual matters. And if you want to really send me an email, you can go to Sumaris, SUMARIS, UCC.com or at gmail.com, and Katie or I will answer you. Katie Kamara is my partner. I am always forgetting all her emails because I've never got them in front of me when I'm doing my show, but I will say you can find her at somafusionmedia.com. And from there you'll find her on Facebook, Katie Kamara, and Soma Fusion Radio. She's got quite a few. I'll have to write them down next time. But you'll find her, and she will be happy to talk with you and share any of her news. So take care and enjoy your future. Bye-bye.